The courtroom fell silent. Every eye was on Jasmine Crockett, standing calm, composed, her gaze unwavering, as Merrick Garland shuffled through his notes, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his usually unshakable face. The tension was palpable, like electricity crackling before a storm. Reporters leaned forward, pens poised, cameras capturing every heartbeat, every twitch, every unspoken thought. The nation was watching, and nobody in that room could escape the gravity of what was about to unfold. Crockett spoke first, her voice steady but commanding, slicing through the murmurs. With all due respect, the record you presented fails to meet the standards of justice this country demands. A pause. Garland's lips pressed together. He hadn't expected her to strike so directly, so confidently. The spectators in the gallery shifted in their seats, sensing something monumental was happening. What started as a routine hearing had become a battlefield, and Crockett had already drawn the first line in the sand. She leaned forward, emphasizing each word with deliberate precision. It is not just about procedure. It is about integrity, accountability, and the trust of every citizen who relies on the system to protect them. The words hung in the air, heavy, undeniable. Garland glanced up, searching for a foothold, for a counter, but the momentum was all hers. The room felt smaller now, charged with anticipation, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Outside, on social media, notifications began to spike. Clips of her opening statements were already trending. Comments streamed in, "Crockett is fearless." Garland looks rattled. This is the courtroom showdown of the year. The ripple effects were already spreading, and nobody could look away. Crockett's presence had become magnetic, her resolve infectious, and the villain, once towering and unassailable, was now facing the first cracks in his armor. And yet, the most shocking moment hadn't even come. Everyone in that courtroom sensed it, even Garland. Something was coming that would leave the legal world reeling. Every whisper, every glance, every subtle movement suggested that this was only the beginning. Crockett had already turned the tide, and the next moves would decide not just the outcome of this hearing, but the story that the nation would tell for years to come. But what happened next would leave the entire country in disbelief. The courtroom silence stretched, almost unbearable, as everyone absorbed the weight of Crockett's opening salvo. Outside, the cameras flashed relentlessly, capturing every reaction, every subtle shift in expression. This was no ordinary hearing. This was a battle over the soul of the nation's justice system, and every citizen had a stake in the outcome, whether they realized it or not. Garland's authority, once unquestioned, now faced scrutiny not just from the legal community, but from millions watching through screens, hungry for clarity, for truth, for a sense that justice could still prevail. Crockett's calm defiance carried more than words. It carried a message. The stakes were higher than procedure, higher than precedent. This was about accountability at the very highest levels. Garland, representing centuries of institutional power, had positioned himself as untouchable, but Crockett's presence shattered that illusion. Every phrase she delivered reminded the room, and the nation, that no one, no matter how powerful, could evade responsibility when the principles of justice were on the line. The tension was almost tangible, a living thing hovering over every participant. Her arguments were precise, rooted in legal precedent, but layered with moral urgency. "We are not merely debating statutes or filings," she said, eyes locked on Garland. "We are debating the values that define us, the principles that bind this country together. Fairness, transparency, and respect for every individual who entrusts the system with their safety and dignity." The words resonated beyond the courtroom walls. Social media exploded, snippets of her speech trending within minutes. Progressive voices hailed her courage. Immigrant communities felt seen, and viewers everywhere felt the validation of a truth spoken boldly against arrogance. Garland shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, the villain in this narrative, the once unshakable guardian of institutional authority, showed signs of doubt. Crockett wasn't just presenting evidence. She was dismantling the narrative piece by piece, leaving gaps where confidence once stood. The spectators felt it. The press sensed it. Even the lawyers in the back row leaned in closer. Something historic was unfolding, and the ripple effects were already spreading. And yet, Even in this charged atmosphere, Crockett did not overreach. Every word, every gesture was calculated to keep Garland off balance while holding the moral high ground. She had created a courtroom crucible, forcing the villain to confront not only her logic, but the very legitimacy of his stance. Outside, hashtags erupted, commentators debated, and citizens argued in their homes, offices, and forums. The fight was no longer confined to those polished walls. It had become a national conversation, a reflection of identity, integrity, and the power of standing firm against entrenched authority. As Crockett paused, letting her point sink in, every observer understood one undeniable truth. This was more than a case. This was a reckoning. And while the world watched, anticipating the next move, one question loomed large. How would Garland respond when the real test of his authority came face to face with unstoppable resolve? The next moments would push both hero and villain to the brink, setting the stage for a confrontation that no one in the courtroom, or beyond, would ever forget. Merrick Garland had long been regarded as a figure of unassailable authority, a guardian of institutional legacy, and a symbol of the judiciary's stability. To many, his career was the embodiment of competence, a steady hand in turbulent times. But beneath that polished exterior lay a record that, under scrutiny, revealed cracks, moment of hesitation, decisions steeped in controversy, and an arrogance cultivated by decades of unchallenged power. Garland's rise had been meteoric, but had also insulated him, creating a bubble where accountability often felt optional. Born into privilege, educated at the nation's top institutions, Garland had mastered the corridors of power early. Colleagues described him as meticulous, precise, and fiercely protective of his reputation. Yet, in that meticulousness was a rigidity, a tendency to rely on precedent over principle when pressure mounted. In the courtroom, his demeanor projected calm, but his past missteps whispered warnings. Policies he endorsed had occasionally sparked public outrage, and decisions that should have championed transparency instead drew criticism for opacity. Critics argued that Garland had become too comfortable with authority, too accustomed to being untouchable, and far too dismissive of the voices challenging the status quo. And now, in this courtroom, those very cracks were exposed. Jasmine Crockett's presence was not merely a test of skill. It was a mirror reflecting Garland's vulnerabilities. Every sharp observation she made, every moral and legal point she raised, chipped away at the aura of infallibility he had cultivated over decades. The villain in this narrative, the one who had long commanded respect without question, was suddenly under siege, forced to confront not only a formidable opponent, but also the cumulative weight of a career built on control and predictability. Even Garland himself must have sensed the shift. The courtroom, once a stage where he dictated the tempo, now became a landscape of uncertainty. Every pause, every hesitation, amplified in the charged atmosphere, and the audience began to perceive the first signs of doubt in his eyes. Social media and commentators, ever vigilant for a crack in the armor, seized on these moments immediately, framing them as a fall from grace in real time. Garland's backstory, once a testament to steady authority, now cast long shadows. It reminded everyone watching that even the most revered figures, no matter how entitled to their power, could falter when confronted by courage, principle, and unyielding moral clarity. Crockett's courtroom was no longer just a legal arena. It was a reckoning that exposed the vulnerabilities of the villain before an entire nation. The tension mounted, and the world waited for what would come next. The hero's story was about to intersect with the villains in ways that would leave everyone breathless. Jasmine Crockett's journey had been anything but conventional. Born to a family that valued resilience over privilege, she grew up understanding the weight of justice not as an abstract concept, but as a lived reality. From her earliest days, she witnessed communities marginalized by systems that promised fairness but too often delivered inequity. Those experiences became the fuel for her ambition, the backbone of a moral compass that would guide every decision she made in court. Crockett didn't just study law. She lived it, internalizing the struggles of those whose voices were routinely ignored. Her rise to the legal ranks was marked by dedication, sacrifice, and a refusal to compromise her principles. While others sought shortcuts or acquiesced to institutional pressures, Crockett honed her craft meticulously, mastering statutes, precedents, and courtroom strategy. She became known not just for her intellect, but for her courage, the rare ability to stand firm when the odds were stacked against her. Her advocacy extended beyond the courtroom. She fought tirelessly for immigrant communities, workers, and those fighting to reclaim dignity in a system that had long overlooked them. Every case she took, every argument she made, was informed by a lived understanding of struggle and perseverance. Crockett's preparation for the Garland confrontation was no exception. Months of research, strategy sessions, and consultations had forged a plan designed not just to challenge legal arguments, but to illuminate moral truths. Her experience in high-pressure cases had trained her to remain unflappable when others might buckle under scrutiny. She understood the power of presence, the way a calm, resolute figure could command attention and shift dynamics without raising a voice unnecessarily. But what truly set her apart was empathy combined with strategy. Crockett recognized that victory in this courtroom would not be measured solely by legal technicalities. It would be measured by the impact her actions could have on public perception, on trust in institutions, and on the sense of possibility for those who had been historically silenced. Every detail of her preparation reflected an understanding of the broader narrative. This confrontation was bigger than herself, bigger than Garland, and bigger than a single courtroom. As she stepped into the chamber, all of that history, all of those struggles, coalesced into a singular force. Crockett was not just a lawyer arguing a case. She was a symbol of integrity, resilience, and unwavering commitment to justice. And as the first words of the confrontation echoed through the room, it became clear the hero was ready. The next moments would test not only her skill, but the moral and emotional strength that had defined her entire journey. What she would do next could redefine the courtroom and the nation's understanding of courage itself. The air in the courtroom crackled with tension as the debate intensified. Garland, once composed and commanding, now displayed subtle signs of unease. His responses, measured but cautious, revealed the cracks Crockett had already begun to expose. Every statement he made seemed calculated to reclaim control, but Crockett's presence had shifted the dynamics. She wasn't just responding. She was orchestrating the conversation, turning each question into an opportunity to illuminate truth and integrity. Crockett leaned into the rhythm of the courtroom, her tone calm yet resolute. "Let's be clear," she said, her gaze unwavering. "The evidence presented does not merely fall short. It actively undermines public trust. The law requires more than procedure. It demands accountability, transparency, and courage. Without these, the system fails everyone it claims to protect." Her words rippled through the room. The gallery murmured, leaning forward, sensing that history was unfolding before them. Even the court reporters, trained to remain neutral, felt the charge in the air as if the very walls were echoing her conviction. Garland attempted to interject, his voice steady but strained. Crockett, however, anticipated every move. She allowed him to speak, but every rebuttal she delivered was precise, dismantling assumptions, exposing inconsistencies, and highlighting moral contradictions with surgical clarity. The courtroom became a battlefield of intellect and principle, the clash of decades-long authority against a meticulously honed moral compass. Each point Crockett made forced Garland to reconsider, to pause, to confront not just her arguments, but the implications of his own legacy. Outside the courtroom, the narrative was already shaping itself. Clips circulated on social media. Hashtags spiked, commentary exploded, and viewers across the nation debated every word, every expression. The fight was no longer confined to the room. It had become a national spectacle. Crockett supporters saw validation. Critics scrambled to reinterpret every exchange. Garland's hesitation was magnified by the digital lens, exposing the human side of a figure who had long seemed untouchable. The tension escalated further when Crockett shifted her approach, moving from legal argumentation to moral imperative. The courtroom, once a stage of procedural formality, now pulsed with emotional intensity. Every pause, every pointed observation, increased the stakes. The audience felt a crescendo building, sensing that the turning point was imminent. And then, in a moment suspended in time, the room seemed to hold its collective breath. The next move would determine not just who commanded the courtroom, but who would define the story of accountability, courage, and justice a nation watching. Then it happened. Crockett leaned forward, her voice calm but resonant. cutting through the tension like a blade. "Let's examine the facts without distraction, without pretense," she began, her words deliberate, each syllable weighted with authority. The courtroom seemed to shrink around her, the murmurs fading to silence. Garland, for the first time, hesitated mid-sentence, caught in precision of her argument. This was a mere debate. It was a masterclass in moral and legal clarity. Crockett methodically dismantled the assumptions underpinning Garland's position. She referenced precedent, juxtaposed policy with principle, and, with every point, revealed the cracks in his authority. "It is not enough to rely on reputation or decades of service," she said, her gaze unwavering. "Accountability is earned through courage, through action, through standing for the people who entrust you with their safety and their rights. Anything less is a betrayal of public trust." Gasps rippled across the courtroom. Even the villain, the once unshakable Garland, now fumbled for words, struggling to maintain composure under the weight of her relentless clarity. The audience in the gallery sat on the edge of their seats. Cameras captured every subtle expression, every pause, every flicker of doubt. Social media had already exploded. Within minutes, clips of Crockett's statements went viral. Comments flooded in. "This is fearless. She's speaking for all of us. Garland looks rattled like never before." Across the nation, progressive and immigrant communities felt a surge of validation, watching a hero embody integrity, eloquence, and unwavering moral courage in real time. Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The power was in her calm precision, in the way every word landed with clarity, in the way she projected both authority and empathy simultaneously. Garland's arguments, once formidable, began to unravel. Each point countered not with aggression, but with unassailable logic and moral force. The courtroom became a stage for a transformation, the villain's confidence eroding while the hero's momentum surged. By the end of her counterattack, the air itself felt different, charged with the realization that the balance of power had shifted. The next move, Garland's response, would determine whether he could salvage authority, or whether Crockett's mastery would define the narrative entirely. Every observer, from the gallery to the millions watching online, knew one thing. The hero had landed a blow that would echo far beyond this courtroom, setting the stage for consequences no one had yet dared to imagine. The courtroom erupted into murmurs and flashes, but the ripple effects didn't stop at those walls. Across social media, the moment Crockett dismantled Garland's defense spread like wildfire. Hashtags trended within minutes. Hashtag Crockett versus Garland. Hashtag Justice Prevails. Hashtag Fearless in Court. Influencers, journalists, and commentators dissected every word, every gesture, every pause, amplifying the narrative of a hero standing unwavering against the unshakable. Even political analysts, usually restrained, couldn't ignore the seismic shift. Discussions on news panels pivoted instantly, framing Crockett not only as a legal powerhouse, but as a symbol of courage, principle, and moral clarity. The villain's carefully curated reputation wavered. Garland, once seen as untouchable, now faced scrutiny amplified by the digital age. Memes circulated, expert commentary questioned his judgment, and public debate ignited across communities nationwide. For progressive audiences, immigrant groups, and identity-driven viewers, Crockett's triumph felt deeply personal, proof that integrity and resilience could challenge even the most entrenched power. Meanwhile, the courtroom itself remained charged with tension. Every observer, every clerk, every journalist sensed the historic nature of what had just occurred. The hero's strategy wasn't just a win in a single hearing. It had become a narrative moment that would define conversations, inspire advocates, and embolden citizens demanding accountability. The stage was set for the final moral reckoning, where lessons would be distilled and inspiration drawn for generations to come. Argumentation. It became a testament to the power of courage, integrity, and unwavering commitment to truth. By calmly dismantling Garland's authority, she reminded the nation that accountability is not a privilege reserved for powerful. It is a right of every citizen, defended by those willing to act with principle. Her triumph demonstrated that steadfast moral clarity, rooted in empathy and resilience, could challenge arrogance and systemic complacency alike. For audiences who had long felt overlooked, marginalized, or silenced, Crockett's stand validated their own experiences. It was more than a courtroom win. It was a narrative of hope, courage, and the enduring impact one individual can have when values guide action. The lesson was unmistakable. When integrity meets courage, justice cannot be denied, and the voices of the people always matter. The nation had witnessed a courtroom showdown that would be remembered for years. Jasmine Crockett's fearless defense left Merrick Garland shaken. But more importantly, it reminded viewers that true leadership and justice are earned through principle, courage, and dedication to the people. Every moment, every word, resonated far beyond the courtroom, sparking dialogue, reflection, and action. For our audience at Argument Arena, this is the moment to engage, reflect, and amplify. Subscribe to the channel to witness more confrontations where courage meets authority and where truth prevails over arrogance. Share this video to spread the story of resilience and integrity, and join the conversation in the comments. What would you stand for if you were in Crockett's shoes? The hero's example is clear. Accountability, justice, and moral courage are not abstract ideals. They are choices we can make starting today. The question remains, in a world dominated by power and prestige, who will step forward to challenge injustice next?